He cocked his head to the side, as if to check that no one was listening in, and then said, "So you just found him on that path?" I nodded. His eyes narrowed slightly. "And how did you know to look there?" "Kyle said he'd been asking about the burnt place," I said. "I thought it would be a good place to look." Donald sighed. "I thought I was clear about that place being off limits. He could have been hurt." He pointed a finger at me. "And off limits applies to staff too. Got it?" The finger lowered. "No, I'm sorry. I shouldn't be getting angry at you. Thank you for finding him. There's just always been these rumors and stories about it, and it leads kids to try to check it out, and then their imaginations get the best of them. I'm just glad he went during the day." He gave me a pat on the back. "Anyway, thanks again." "For sure." I walked back to my table, passing Kyle and Nathan along the way. They were both laughing along with the rest of the cabin. Kyle looked up and smiled at me. He seemed much more relaxed. Good. As we were leaving the mess hall, I pulled Jonathan aside. "What do you know about the burnt place?" he chuckled. "Same thing everyone else knows. It's a death trap that they can't get rid of because the area is so overgrown. Why? Because, what could I say? Because earlier today, a camper had had the crap scared out of them there. Because it was linked to Kate's disappearance, that her blood had led me to it. Couldn't really say that to the guy who told me to stop looking into her. Because there's some weird stuff going on here." He briefly rolled his eyes. "No, don't do that. You invited me here. You can't just shrug away my concerns. Come on, John." His lip curled up in a half smile. "You're right. I'm sorry. Tell you what, how about this Saturday when we go into town? We get lunch together and talk about everything. I know a great restaurant too." I was happily surprised. That'd be perfect. As we went back into our cabins, I was already making a mental list of all the things I wanted to ask. On Friday, we finished climbing early, and I stopped by the skate park to see Jonathan. He was handing out little wrenches as a keepsake to each of the campers, and he grinned when he saw me. "Who wants to see me do one last trick?" The campers cheered, and Jonathan grabbed his board and ran onto the park. He hopped on and skated around in circles, picking up speed before heading up a ramp. He stopped at the top, balancing his board on the edge for a few seconds, and then dropped back down. Now, moving even faster, he headed to the ramp on the other side, this one a good 6 feet tall. He flew up it and into the air, where he spun around 180 degrees and dropped back down. The campers shouted and clapped. I joined in. I had no idea Jonathan was so good at this. He curved around, now speeding to a series of rails. Just as he reached the first one, his board suddenly stopped and jackknifed up, causing Jonathan to fly forward and crash headfirst into the railing. He hadn't been wearing a helmet, something I only realized as I heard the impact of bone on iron. He was taken to the hospital an hour later, after the other counselors and I had tried to calm down the terrified campers and get help from the infirmary. And from what I heard, he has multiple broken bones and a severe concussion. After he was whisked away, I inspected the place where his board had suddenly crashed. A rusty nail was jutting out about an inch. His board must have caught it in the exact worst place. And now, as I sit in this restaurant alone, I'm trying to tell myself that this injury is just a coincidence. People get hurt at camp all the time, but I'm really not sure if I buy it. Kate's disappearance, Nathan's fearful encounter, Jonathan's injury. The shit at Yorniwana is getting weirder and weirder. And now I'm stuck here, all alone. This week, I was assigned a cabin of 10-year-olds, but due to there being extra counselors on hand, and also the fact that 10-year-old boys are monsters, I was paired with a co-counselor, Kyle. I was pretty excited when I found out. I hadn't had a whole lot of time to talk to him about what had happened with Nathan the week prior, but now we'd be spending the week together in close quarters, which would give us plenty of time to discuss what was going on. I initially thought that our pairing had been by chance, but on Sunday evening, after all activities were done, Donald asked me to come to his cabin before I went back to mine. His cabin was actually a real one, with doors and windows, and a double bed with an actual mattress. I knew Donald tended to come up to Yorniwana in early spring and stay until the snow started to fall in the winter, so it made sense that he'd turned it into a living space. He invited me to take a seat and then walked to the small fridge along the back wall. "Would you like a drink?" He opened it to reveal about a dozen bottles of water, as well as a few cans of pop. I passed, but my eyes were drawn to a cross, attached to a line of beads that hung just above the fridge. I motioned to it. "Is that a rosary?" I wasn't Catholic, but I had enough friends who were to recognize it. He laughed. "Don't tell anyone. It was my grandfather's, and I like to keep it around." He grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge and sat down on the bed, opposite me. "I just wanted to talk to you briefly about Kyle. Keep an eye on him, will you? He's a good kid, and I know he's trying his best. It's just that." "That what?" I asked. Donald grimaced. "I can't say. I can't put it into words. Just keep an eye on him, okay?" I shrugged. "Sure thing." I got up to leave, and as I did, I noticed 2 boxes of salt on the shelf next to the door. "A midnight snack?" I asked. Another laugh. "For the winter, when everything freezes. Not easy to walk around icy paths." I left his cabin and went back to my own. Kyle was struggling to get all the campers into their bunks, but my presence seemed to get them to obey. He led them in a brief Bible study and then turned off the lights, but sleep didn't come easily for anyone in that cabin. The boys were up till nearly midnight, talking about Minecraft and Fortnite. And once I did fall asleep, morning came quickly. Even though Kyle and I were now living literally feet from each other, I had a hard time getting him alone to talk about what was happening at this camp. We taught different activities during the day, and when we were in the cabin, there was always at least one camper with us. Not exactly the opportune time to bring up something that had traumatized a boy the previous week. But I knew something was on Kyle's mind. At meals, and in the cabin, I'd frequently catch him looking at me with a twinge of concern. What did he know? And how could we use it to figure out what was going on here? Finally, on Tuesday evening, my campers' supply of 10-year-old energy was finally depleted, and they were all asleep by 9:30. I was on my phone, typing out the above, when Kyle quietly got up and sat down on my bed. We exchanged a few words about how the week was going and which camper was the smelliest. Gavin, obviously. Before I got to the real issue and asked him what Nathan had said after Donald had calmed him down. "Nothing," Kyle said. It was hard to tell from his voice whether he saw this as a good or bad thing. I asked him several times what he'd seen. He just said he got lost and scared and was afraid he'd never be found in the woods. It was a decent explanation. I looked around the darkened cabin at each of the sleeping boys. At that age, imagination can run wild. Maybe that's all that happened. "But I don't believe it," Kyle continued. "There's something weird going on here. Something not of this world." He paused. "Do you believe in demons?" I wasn't sure. Probably not. There had to be a rational explanation for everything that had happened. But a girl I liked had disappeared, and a place reeking of sulfur had been involved, and now I finally had a friend who would be willing to investigate it with me. I nodded, though in the dark, I don't know if he could see. "Of course. Then we need to go back to the burnt place," Kyle said. "And actually check it out. Look for clues or something, or a sign of the demonic." "Sure, but when? If we go during the day, someone could see us." Donald had driven home how off-limits the burnt place was, and given what had happened with Nathan, he probably viewed me and Kyle with extra suspicion. "Then let's go at night," Kyle said. "We have flashlights and no one will notice that we're not in the cabin. We'll do it tomorrow." I really wasn't sure what a night trip to the burnt place would accomplish, but if it helped Kyle calm down, I was all for it. I agreed, and the next evening we made a big show of telling the campers how tired we were as we got ready for bed. I fell asleep pretty quickly, and what felt like minutes later, I was pushed awake by Kyle. "What time is it?" I asked groggily. I'd set a quiet alarm on my phone for 3 a.m. 2:30, he replied. He sounded fully awake. Given how jumpy he'd been during the day, it wouldn't have surprised me if he'd been up the whole time. "Let's go." I got changed into my darkest clothes, the same I'd worn when I'd made the trip to Kate's cabin 3 weeks ago, and we grabbed our flashlights. I had a small one with a decent beam. He had the spotlight kind that could light up an entire field. We decided to use mine to start. We left the cabin and moved across the field. towards the main lodge. The air was crisp, and there was no sign of anyone around. We reached the lodge and found the path behind it. Using both of our lights, we slowly made our way through the path, me leading the way. I could hear Kyle breathing heavily, panting almost. As we traversed, I didn't blame him. The forest was pitch black, with no light but that from our lights, and even his high-powered one could go no more than a few feet into the trees. Every noise, no matter how faint, caused me to jump. I realized that I was completely at the mercy of my imagination, and my brain was coming up with some horribly creative ideas of what lurked just beyond the path. As scary as it was, it did help explain Nathan's state of mind when we'd found him. Maybe he was just really, really scared. After a minute of walking, I detected the sulfuric smell again. Kyle emitted a small whimper. Neither of us said anything more, but we pressed on. The scent became stronger, to the point where my nostrils felt like they were burning. I told myself it was a good thing. We were close. The path finally ended, and we walked out into the clearing. Both of our lights focused on the rubble in the middle. Kyle took several deep breaths. I tried to, but my lungs would only allow me short, shallow ones. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I was actually scared. I shook my head and tried to push it from my mind. It was the darkness. It was playing with my head. We moved around the wreckage in opposite ways. I really wasn't sure what we were looking for. I hadn't seen anything when I'd found this place 2 weeks prior. But I told myself that maybe this would be good for Kyle. Maybe if we didn't find anything, it would put his fears to rest. Oh God. Or maybe not. Kyle was leaning over some of the twisted steel, looking in on the center of the debris. He waved his hand at me. "Kill your light." I did so, and he did the same. Oh fuck no. What? I asked. I walked over to him and looked in. Oh. My breath was involuntarily drawn out of me, like I'd been hit in the stomach. I closed my eyes and opened them, just to be sure I was seeing it. There was no doubt. In the middle of the burnt place were glowing red coals. Needing proof that they were real, I ran to the closest tree, tore off a stick, and ran back. I held the stick up to one of the coals. After a few seconds, it began to smoke and glow slightly. I quickly dropped it. An audible sob came from Kyle as he slowly sat down, bringing his knees up to his chest and wrapping his arms around them, not unlike how we'd found Nathan. "It's real," he said. "There's a demon here, and it's my fault. It's all my fault." Whoa, I said. I sat down next to him, but facing the opposite directions of his legs so that I could look directly at him. "We don't know that there's a demon, but even if there is, it wasn't because of you." "Yes, it is." He raised his head up. His face was streaked with tears. "I brought it here. I should have stayed away. Oh God, I'm sorry." I flipped around so that I was on my knees. I put both my hands on his shoulders and looked right into his eyes, just inches from mine. "Kyle, listen to me. You had nothing to do with any of this. We're going to figure out what is causing all of this, but there has to be a logic." And then he kissed me. He sat up, put his lips against mine, and kissed me. Honestly, my first thought was, oh damn, now we're going to get kicked out of camp. But after the surprise had worn off, I pulled my head back and pushed him away slightly, while keeping my hands on him. A million thoughts filled my head, but overriding all of them was an incredible amount of sympathy for this kid. I'm sorry." His voice was barely a whisper. "I shouldn't have done that. No, it's okay. I mean, I wasn't into him, but it wasn't a big deal. I won't tell anyone or anything." "It's all my fault," he said again. His body was shaking. "There's this evil inside me. Satan has me, and I brought him here. In the darkness, I hoped he couldn't see the 10 different ways my face was twisting." "Do you mean?" I struggled to figure out what he was saying. "You think, you brought a demon here, because you're gay?" He tried to pull back, but I wasn't letting go of him. "I'm not gay," he said through gritted teeth. "I have a demon giving me these thoughts. That's what's been causing all of this." Jesus, where to even begin? "There's nothing wrong with you," I said. "And if you're gay or bi or whatever, it's not because of a demon." My nose had caught scent of something aside from the sulfur. Something much more familiar. Smoke. I let go of Kyle and stood up. Beyond the darkened forest, I could see flickers of light coming from the girls' cabins. Shit. I turned my flashlight back on and ran into the woods. I took multiple branches to the face and hands, but with the sheer amount of fear coursing through my blood, I hardly noticed. I burst out of the path and had my fears confirmed. One of the cabins was on fire. The tarps covering the door and both windows were burning in large, orange flames. Worse yet, no one seemed to have noticed. I sprinted down the hill towards the flames, screaming "fire" at the top of my lungs. After a few seconds, lights began to turn on in the other cabins. Then a chorus of screams erupted from the burning one. I reached it and felt the heat from the flames. "Stay calm! We're going to get you out of there!" There had to be a fire extinguisher nearby. I shone my flashlight around. "Come on, where is it?" I tried not to think about how scared the girls in the burning cabin had to be. No, I was going to get them out. I had to. At last, I found the red canister next to one of the other cabins. I grabbed it, pulled out the pin, and sprayed down the tarps on the door. The flames went out enough that I was able to grab onto one and pull it back. I looked into the cabin to see a half-dozen girls and their counselor huddle in the back, as flames burned along the windows on either side of them. "Let's go!" I shouted. "Hurry!" I didn't have to tell them twice. They all ran through the cabin and out the opening in the door. Once they were out, I did my best to spray down the flaps on the side. Fortunately, the actual cabin hadn't caught fire, and after Donald and Beth arrived with extra extinguishers, the flames were put out for good. As Beth tried to calm down the campers, Donald took me aside. He asked me what had happened and, with a bit of a wry grin, what I was doing there. Given that I hadn't seen Kyle since I'd run from him at the burnt place, I figured it was safe to lie. I said I'd gotten up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, and when I smelled smoke, I had run to the girls' section to investigate it. Donald seemed to buy it, but he kept looking at my clothes, my dark pants and shirt. Oops. Eventually, I went back to my cabin. Kyle was in his bed, turned toward the wall. I whispered his name, but either he was asleep or didn't want to talk to me. For the rest of the week, he kept his distance, refusing to talk about what had happened at the burnt place, and keeping campers around so that I couldn't bring anything up in front of them. Meanwhile, it felt like Donald had his eyes on me at every meal and camp-wide activity. I heard from the camp grapevine that the smoke detectors in the cabin had been tampered with, allowing the fire to grow without anyone knowing. I kept quiet about finding the coals. It would only go to make me look even more suspicious. Though honestly, at this point, I don't really care. I'm ready to go home. There's just too much weird shit going on, and whether it's a demon or Dracula or whatever, I'm done with it. A job at Swiss Chalet would be far better than this. So if any of you can make a trip up to Name of Town Removed, please email me by 3 today. If not, guess I'm in for another week at Yorniwana. I'll let you know what happens. You know, if I survive. Well, none of y'all emailed me before I got on the bus to go back to camp. So this week, I was placed in the oldest cabin group. I had a bunch of 14-year-olds to look after. I'm not sure if Donald had taken pity on me or what, but it turns out that age group is as chill as they come. They just wanted to lie around and listen to Drake and do as little as possible, and I was more than happy to oblige them. None of them noticed how stressed I must have looked, especially for the first few days. Also, Kyle's gone. The last I saw him was Saturday morning, after all our campers had left. He had already packed all his things up as I came back to the cabin. He told me he enjoyed working with me, wished me luck, gave me a pat on the shoulder and walked out. It was the last time I saw him. He wasn't at the staff lunch on Sunday, and at this point I knew better than to ask. Still, it gave me one more thing to think about as I lay in my bunk for hours in the hot cabin. This week was warm AF, easily mid-30s with the humidex, and while it made the cold lake super inviting, it also made everything else really uncomfortable. Teaching rock climbing or playing capture the flag under the hot sun was not fun at all. Nights weren't much better. It took me a while to fall asleep, no matter how tired I was. But I'm burying the lead here. Amongst the group of teen boys in my cabin was Ian. And though that initially meant nothing to me, it clearly was a big deal to all the other counselors. It seemed like multiple times at every meal, someone would come up and ask how he was doing. I'd say fine, and they'd go on about how awesome he is and how lucky I was to have him in my tabin. I couldn't figure out why. He was just like all the other boys, maybe a bit skinnier and with a little less acne, but otherwise just as lazy and sarcastic and obsessed with girls. The first few days were uneventful. Rumors of what had caused the fire the previous week were spreading quickly, and Donald and Beth weren't doing anything to help. At our staff lunch on Sunday, they had told us that a fire marshal would be investigating it, and if any of us knew anything, that we should talk to them. Beth seemed frightened, and Donald seemed angry. Neither of them seemed to have a firm grasp of what was going on. But beyond that, there was nothing more I learned about the burnt place or Kate, and now Kyle's, disappearance. I saw this as my final week at Yorniwana. Surely someone would be able to get me next Saturday, and what better way to spend it than by involving myself as little as possible. But then, Wednesday night, I had a nightmare. I was back at the burnt place. The forest around me was on fire, and I could hear screams coming from the middle of the rubble. I walked over and found Kate, lying among burning embers, shouting for help. I tried to reach her, but I couldn't get over the debris. As I watched, the hooded figure appeared beside her. It held its razor-sharp claws up and then plunged them into her stomach. I woke up drenched in sweat and gasping for breath. I checked my phone, 2:16 a.m. I was now wide awake. Great. A light came on me from above. Bad dream? It was Ian. He leaned over his top bunk opposite mine. Yeah, I whispered. Did I wake you? He pointed his light to the book in his other hand. Nah, I don't sleep a whole lot. Right, I needed to get out of the cabin and calm my mind down. I'm going for a walk, I said. Wanna come? Sure. He climbed down from his bunk. I put on some shorts and we both went outside. It wasn't any cooler out of the cabin, but there was at least a bit of a breeze. I headed toward the field. Ian walked along, his headlamp lighting the path in front of us. So do you just not sleep or what? I asked. He shrugged. I never really needed a lot of sleep. Guess it's just one more way my body's screwed up. I give him a quick up and down. Looks fine to me. He laughed and then gave me a bit of a look. Do you not know about me? Only that everyone here seems to think you're the coolest person in the world. I grinned at him. Why they think that is beyond me. He jabbed at me with his elbow. But really, what's your story? We came to a stop in the middle of the field. Thousands of stars twinkled in the dark sky above us, while a crescent moon hung just above the lake. I used to have cancer, leukemia. Shit. The word was out of my mouth before I could stop myself. I mean, darn. Yeah. I've heard worse. But I had it from ages 10 to 13. Everyone here knew, obviously. I guess they see me as some kind of hero because I got through it. I don't blame them. I can't even imagine what that would have been like. The biggest health scare I'd ever had was breaking my wrist when I was 11. And I had cried like a baby. It sucked, he laughed. Like so much. I couldn't move, couldn't eat, could barely talk, and it went on for months. In the last 4 years, I honestly think I've spent more time in the hospital than anywhere else, and the nurses weren't even hot. And now I was starting to see why everyone liked this kid. He was cool. But God got me through it. I prayed so much when I was getting treatments, and I know it worked. Even when I couldn't move and I was throwing up every 5 minutes, I know he was right next to me. He gave me strength the entire time. That's awesome. I'm glad your faith. Our faith got you through it. God is good. We walked down the field to the lake. God is good, Ian echoed. But it's still scary. Anytime I feel pain in my body or I get sick, I think, damn, it's back again. And the nightmares I've had. I'm always back in the hospital, hooked up to all these wires, about to die. I guess it's a good thing I don't have to sleep a whole lot. Yeah. Wow. Well, I'm glad you're better now. Thanks. We reached one of the docks. The soft sound of the water rippled in front of us. My body still felt incredibly warm as I stared out at the water. If I were to jump in, would you tell anyone? He shook his head. I stripped down to my boxers, walked to the end of the dock and lightly hopped in. The cold, dark water enveloped me. I went under and slowly exhaled, allowing my body to sink down deeper. After a few seconds, my feet touched the grimy bottom. I opened my eyes. Nothing but pure blackness. This was the most peaceful I'd felt in weeks. I pushed off of the mud and surfaced. My body temp had dropped a good 10 degrees. I climbed back onto the dock. I hope you didn't run off with clothes. No response. Ian, where are you? I walked back onto the grass and looked around. My clothes were still lying in a pile, but my camper was nowhere to be found. Shit. Shit. I rifled through my clothes, trying to find my flashlight, only to remember that I hadn't brought it with me. Where the hell was he? Had he gone back to the cabin? He wouldn't have. And I was only underwater for a few seconds. He wouldn't have been able to run from the field that quickly. So then what had happened? Had something gotten him? I called out his name again, and then again, my voice breaking. Nothing. My legs gave way and I fell to my knees. Hot tears started to form in my eyes. Fuck, Kate, Jonathan, Kyle, and now Ian. And it was my fault. We should have stayed in the cabin, shouldn't have come out here in the middle of the night, shouldn't have left him alone while I jumped in the lake. Hey! Ian walked out from the forest just north of the dock. Are you okay? Relief poured over me. Oh, thank God, I said. Where were you? What happened? I was taking a leak, he said slowly. Sorry if I scared you. No, I'm fine. I put my clothes back on. I was still wet, but I'd manage. Come on, let's go back to the cabin. We started walking back through the field in silence. As we neared the cabins, Ian quietly said, Can I tell you something I haven't told anyone else? Not because it's bad or anything, it's just a bit weird. I stopped so that we wouldn't wake anyone. Of course. He took a breath. There were points when I was in the hospital where I honestly thought I was about to die. Like, I could feel my body just shutting down and giving up. And when I did, I saw something. It was like I was being transported there. Heaven? He shook his head. No, he said, even quieter. I saw this place. I closed my eyes and I was back at camp. And I remember thinking, this is okay. I could stay here. It was peaceful. My eyes felt itchy again. I put an arm around his shoulder and pulled him close to me. That's really special. This camp is special, he said, and it's because of you. I kept him pulled against me. We stood there in silence for another minute, but this time I broke it. I think a demon is attacking this camp. I'm not sure why I said it. Ian had been so forthcoming with me, and I guess I figured if there was anyone I could trust, it was him. He said, I remember a counselor telling me a few years ago that a demon was causing my cancer. That's some bullshit right there. Yeah, everyone here has this weird fascination with demons and Satan and whatnot. And you don't? He gently pulled away from my half-hug. You know, they could be real, but God's stronger than them. That's one thing I am certain of. He looked right up at me. Why do you think it's a demon? What the hell? I gave him a quick explanation of what I had experienced at Yorniwana, in particular, the strangeness of the burnt place, the cabin catching fire, and of course, Kate's disappearance. When I had finished, Ian scoffed. So all of this is because a girl you like mysteriously vanished from camp? Why don't you just call her to find out what happened? He said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I can't. I don't know her number. Did you even look? I don't know, the med center. Of fucking course. It would have everyone's medical forms, which would include their contact info. You're right, I said. I'll have to sneak in there sometime. Screw that. Let's go now. He had a massive devilish grin on his face. How could I resist? We went back across the field again, this time to the main lodge. The med station was attached to it, a small clinic that could fit about 5 people. So far this summer, I'd only been there twice, at the beginning of the summer, to drop off my forms, and 2 weeks earlier, when a camper had been stung by a wasp at the climbing wall. The station was locked, obviously, but Ian suggested I push hard on the door, and lo and behold, it opened. It's been like this for years, he said. We walked in through the tiny waiting area and into the main room, which had large cabinets on either side, filled with what I'm sure was medicines and equipment. Ian shone his light at one of the drawers. It's probably in here. He grabbed it and yanked it open, revealing dozens of hanging folders, each with a different name on the tab. Using his light, I worked through them, trying to find Kate's. It was at the very back, and it held about 10 different sheets. It occurred to me that I was being super invasive, that this was her private medical information, so I looked through to find her contact info and nothing else. It was second from the top, with her cell number about 1/3 of the way down. Ian pointed to the back wall. Phone's right there. I rushed over, picked up it, and dialed Kate's number. As it rang, I asked myself exactly what I was expecting. It was the middle of the night. Would someone pick up? Would I have to leave a message? What would I say? I couldn't. Oh fuck. It was her voice, groggy and confused, but it was Kate. Is someone there? Kate? The words sputtered out of me. My heart was threatening to break right out of my chest. What? Oh God. She recognized me. I was sure of it. Why are you calling me in the middle of the night? I'm sorry. I wanted. Shit, what was I calling for? I hadn't actually thought she'd pick up. Are you okay? There was heavy breathing on the end of the line. You shouldn't have called, she finally said. I thought someone would have told you that. They did. Light caught my eye out the back window. It looked like a flashlight. I pushed myself to the wall, looked at Ian and pointed to my forehead. Ian turned off his headlamp. I was concerned about you. The light briefly shone directly in the window. I nearly dropped the receiver. I'm sorry, Kate said. I didn't mean to concern you, but I can't talk to you right now. I can't talk to anyone from camp. Goodbye. Wait, I started, but she'd already hung up. Fuck. My head dropped as I put the phone back. I'm sorry, Ian said. It's fine. My head was spinning with thoughts, but overpowering all of them was a desire to get out of the med station. Come on, we gotta go. Again, the light from outside briefly flashed through the window. I quickly put the pages back in the folder and closed the cabinet. We crept out of the station and closed the door, but I put my arm out and held Ian back before we could go across the field. Whoever was behind the lodge with the flashlight could easily see us. We waited, silently, for a good 5 minutes before I saw light come from around the building. I held my breath as the person walked up and in to Donald's cabin. Donald? What was he doing out in the middle of the night? Probably taking a leak too. Yorniwana's washroom facilities really needed some upgrading. With Donald back in his cabin, Ian and I ran back through the field. Halfway across, I stopped him. You tired yet? He wasn't. Me neither, and the sky sure is nice tonight. Would be a shame to not appreciate it. He laughed, and we lay down on the grass, looking up at the stars. It was gorgeous. There were numerous shooting stars going across the glowing Milky Way directly above us. We stayed out there for another hour before I felt myself dozing off, and then we trudged back to the cabin and quickly fell asleep. Earlier today, I said goodbye to Ian, hugging him tighter than I've hugged anyone in a long time, and telling him that he could always count on me as a friend. Not gonna lie, I shed a few tears as he drove off. The other staff were right. He's a really special kid. I now have 3 weeks left here, and about 1 million questions to answer. The fact that Kate is alive is relieving, but I still have no idea what happened to her or why she wouldn't talk to me. And the mysteries surrounding the burnt place are only getting more confusing. Could this be something supernatural? It's still hard to wrap my mind around it. I just don't know. But here's what I do know. This camp means something to so many people, including a 14-year-old cancer survivor. Before he left, and after I had finished squeezing his frail little body, he asked me if I was going to figure out what was going on. I promised I would. And it's a promise I intend to keep. I have 3 weeks left here, and I will be staying until the end. So for those who emailed me asking if I needed a ride home, I don't anymore. I have a mystery to solve. And demon or not, damn it if I'm not going to try. Hard to believe it's already the 2nd week of August. There are just 3 weeks left at Yorniwana. And honestly, you can kind of feel it here. The counselors are looking a bit more tired, everyone's patience is wearing a bit thinner, and tensions between everyone seem to be rising. Of course, that could also be because things are getting batshit crazy here. While last week kept me occupied with Ian and a bunch of chill bros, apparently not everyone had as relaxing a week. At Sunday's staff lunch, I found out that one of the girls' counselors had woken up in the middle of the night and noticed that one of her campers wasn't in her bunk. She thought the kid had gone to the bathroom, so she went back to sleep, but about an hour later, she and the rest of the cabin were awoken by the same girl, now back in her bunk and screaming in fear. It took Beth all night to calm her down, and she wouldn't say what had upset her. It's being kept in hushed whispers, but the word demon is getting used more and more frequently around here. At first, it was the super fundamentalist types like Jordan, but from what I've heard from the female rock climbing instructors, everyone's on edge about some paranormal attack. It hasn't helped that 2 of the 3 cabins that were struck by the burnt claw earlier this summer have had weird things happen to them. One had the fire I put out 2 weeks ago, the other had the terrified camper. The third was mysteriously taken out of use this week, though whether that was due to Beth and Donald believing in a potential demonic attack, or simply because no girl staff member would agree to live in it, is beyond me. Anyways, let's get to my week. I had another cabin of 12-year-olds this week, and honestly, I'm so good with that age group that I should consider starting my own business, revolving around helping parents through their kids' preteen years. Also, I've learned that you can say big oof to anything and it's considered an acceptable response. Very cool. As the campers were arriving this week, one of the moms took me aside and told me that her son, Adam, still had a bit of a bedwetting problem and asked if he could have the bed closest to the door, in case he had to make a quick dash to the bathroom at night. That bed happens to be the counselor's bed. It's a bit bigger and is the only one in the cabin without a bunk above it, but I was fine to let him use it. I took the bed at the back corner and had no issue leading my patented Bible studies at night. I have to say, I felt a weight off my shoulders as the week started. Actually talking to Kate on the phone and knowing that she was alive was a huge relief for me, even if it was coupled with burning questions about what the hell had happened to her and why she refused to talk to me. And it's given me a new purpose. Find out what's going on at the burnt place, without arousing any further suspicion from Donald. Tuesday afternoon, I was resting in my bunk while the campers were off playing on a huge, soapy tarp in the middle of the field. There was a knock on the cabin as Jordan walked in. He looked confused. "Why are you on a camper's bed?" he asked as he sat down on Adam's. "'Cause the one you're sitting on is being used by a bedwetter," I smirked. I thought it would make him stand back up, but he just smirked back. "Finally have one, huh? Just don't be surprised if you find a few wet diapers under his bunk at the end of the week." Ew, I shuddered slightly. "So, what's up?" "I have something for you." He opened his hand, revealing a thin black rope with a white cross hanging off of it. "I've been praying a lot about everything happening here, and today, God kept saying your name to me. I'm not sure exactly what he meant, but I figured you could use this." "Thanks." I got up and took the necklace. The rope was smooth and the cross was perfectly polished. I put it on. "It's made from South African stone," he continued. "I got it when I did a missions trip there in the winter. There was something about it that really attracted me." "You sure you don't need it yourself?" I asked. While his reasons for giving it to me were rather strange, it was nevertheless a very kind gesture. He smiled. "I'm good." Jordan grabbed his collar and pulled it down and to his left, revealing a sizable cross tattoo over his chest. "Just stay vigilant, okay? The enemy is ramping up his attacks against us, and I think God has a purpose for you in all this." He left, and I slipped the necklace under my shirt. I didn't want to have to explain it to anyone. Got to admit, though, I was touched by it. Jordan was weird, even by Yorniwana standards, but he obviously cared about the camp and the people in it. I kept the cross under my shirt for the rest of the day and the next, being reminded of it every so often as I felt the cool stone against my skin. I considered taking it off at night, but decided to keep it on. Given the weird things that had been happening when the sun went down, it was probably when I needed the cross the most. Turns out I was right. The night after Jordan had given me the necklace, I once again woke up and found myself staring at the robed figure, now standing in the middle of the cabin. It towered over the bunks, its back hunched and its hooded head bent over. I slowly looked up until my eyes met the lifeless hole where its face should have been. As they did, I was overwhelmed with the smell of sulfur, as though it were all around me and inside every inch of my body. I wanted to shrink back in fear, to try to disappear into the mattress again and wait for the thing to leave. That's not the end of story. Wait for the next part. Until then, if you liked my video, then hit the like button and comment down your views. For more content like this, do subscribe my channel.